Joining us here in Philadelphia Live, you know this man. He's on TV and radio all the time because he's very, very smart, and he knows the issue of radical Islam better than I think anybody else out there. I'm talking about Dr. Zeoli Jasser, the founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, author of A Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim patriot's fight to save his father. And Dr. Jasser was appointed by Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, now Majority Leader, to the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. So, Dr. Jasser, welcome back to Philadelphia. Appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's great to be with you.
First of all, the question, I think, number one, is the vetting process that is in place right now. If, prior to Friday night's executive order, was that vetting process sufficient to screen out radical Islamic terrorists?
Well, not at all. And I'll tell you why. Because currently the axis of counterterrorism is about terror. It's about a tactic. It's about violence. So they call it all of the programs being spent by Homeland Security and even State Department abroad. We engage foreign governments based on the concept that we can find violent extremists. And I don't even know what that is. And I think they're trying to say it's related to groups that use terrorism as a tactic. But unfortunately, when we do counter-radicalization, they don't look at the pre-violent root causes or precursors, if you will. So it should be, the center of axis should be countering violent Islamism, which is a theocratic mentality, no different than the Islamic State of Saudi Arabia, of Iran. These are theocracies that are supremacist. And the only difference between the Saudis and ISIS is the method and the organization of the government that does it. But ideologically, it's no different. So currently, we're not vetting for Islamist or against Islamist or jihadist ideas. And unfortunately, it'd be like if in the Cold War, we said, well, we're really just vetting against those Soviets that are militant instead of the Soviet war theory or even communist war theory. So we're not even there yet. And I think the pause that President Trump called for is extremely important. But the question is what are we going to do during this pause? Are we going to convene that commission on radical Islamism he called for in the campaign? Will we start to actually begin to discern between Muslims that share our values versus Muslims that are part of the theocratic mentality?
Let's say for a second that the president called on you, and I hope he does, Dr. Jasser. He says, Zeoli Jasser, I need your help in coming up with the kind of questions we should ask when people want to enter this country. What are some of those questions Zeoli Jasser would ask?
I would tell you, our Muslim Reform Movement is a group of 15 different Muslim leaders in Europe, Canada, and the U.S. that we convened, our American Islamic Forum convened. And after 3 days of rolling up our sleeves, we came up with a 2-page declaration. The link for it is at MuslimReformMovement.org. And in that declaration, it has a statement of principles related to national security, peace, and human rights. And in those, we said we reject the Islamic State, not only ISIS, but all Islamic states. We reject the caliphate as a concept. We don't believe it's necessary. We reject violent jihad. We think the era for any type of jihad is over. We reject institutionalized Sharia, which means that while a person might have personal Sharia for their dietary practices, prayer, family issues, but public or criminal type Sharia in states is something we stand against. Equal rights for men and women, ability for people to have free speech and criticize the faith and against blasphemy laws and things like that. Those are all, I think, important to discern whether folks share our values or whether they're theocrats.
And so is it appropriate then for the government to ask, do you believe in the United States Constitution? Do you believe in equality? Do you believe in the concepts of religious liberty and freedom?
Absolutely. And I think from a refugee perspective, the question would be, do they believe in universal human rights? If they say they'd be offended and they want it to be criminal if somebody drew a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad, that's not our value system in the West. People need to have the ability for free expression. And, the ACLU types will say, oh, this is not the role of government. Well, hold on a second. The ACLU defends the core values of the Constitution all the time, supposedly. So do they really want a sort of national fratricide where we allow people to come in that might actually have deeply held beliefs that are anathema to the U.S. Constitution and freedom and equality for all under God? So, I think this is an important thing. It's not a religious test. It is a test about universal human rights and whether they accept those principles. And, listen, studies have shown 20 to 30% of Muslims believe in some type of Islamic State, but those 70% that don't, we should welcome in, and we should have a means of vetting against those ideas.
Dr. Zeoli Jasser is the founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. Now, you have spent your career trying to get Islam out of the game of politics, and the notion of theocracy, as you just mentioned. Saudi Arabia is a theocracy. There are several other Muslim countries on the list that didn't make the list, I should say. They're theocracies, and they're governed by religious ideas. Should those countries also be excluded from coming to America until we sort of figure out a way to properly vet them?
Yeah, I think that, so the question is, how do we roll out a change from the last 8 years? And I'll tell you, even the Bush administration, Attorney General Gonzalez in 2007 had a memo saying, don't use the term jihad, don't use the term Salafism, because it empowers radicals. I mean, we have a huge shift in the axis of this conversation that's even beyond what the Obama administration set us back. But having said that, we need to be careful not to get whiplash, because really, the main cauldrons of terrorism, radicalism, are Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Qatar, our allies, who are maybe the firefighters with us against Al-Qaeda and ISIS, but they're also the arsonists through ideological distribution of the textual interpretations of Islam that come from their monarchs and theocrats there. So what do? I think that with this pause to the 7 hotspots, we then evolve into creating this commission that President Trump called for, engage Muslim reformers into a dialogue about this is not about a specific religion, but vetting against those who view government as a means to impose religion through their interpretations of Sharia. So, it is very American to say that we will not allow theocrats in. And we can't say that, well, our founding fathers did it, but we just don't know how to do it. And we won't do it because it's about Islam, which we're going to politically protect. And I think that there is a way to do that, and the way to roll it out is through a national conversation, engage both public and private leaders in doing this, and make it clear that the protection of religious minorities, Christians, Yazidis, dissident voices of Islam like myself, Sunni Muslims that fight against the leadership, are also, I think, oppressed minorities. So there are ways to do this in a very American way without violating our own religious freedoms.
Do you think that Saudi Arabia should be on the list?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia and Qatar should have been added. And I think they should lead the list, even though they're our allies. If you look at what radicalized the Syrian revolution, and my parents are from Syria, I have family in Aleppo and Damascus, the radicalization from foreign jihadists and the billions flowing in from Saudi Arabia and Qatar are the primary reason that that revolution went from one of the masses, diverse masses, to being an Islamist-dominated one against the genocidal Assad regime.
What does it say to you when you hear Democrats like Nancy Pelosi and others who come out and say, I'm a Muslim? They're trying now to claim your faith for their own, for political purposes. How does that make you feel?
I would love to ask Congresswoman Pelosi, when she whispered into Andre Carson's ear, and there was a hot mic yesterday, and she said, tell him you're a Muslim, tell him you're a Muslim. And, listen, we are not an identity movement. Islam is a diverse religion with very diverse opinions from left to right on interpretations of the role of the Quran and the role of our interpretations of faith and government. So if it's a diverse religion, you can't use us as an identity politic to attack the right as being anti-Islam or anti-Muslim. And this is where their whole mantra about being a Muslim ban is all about exploiting us Muslims as an identity group that they want to claim to protect, when in fact, I would love to ask her, does she think Catholics or whatever faith she may profess is monolithic, and therefore we should look at all Catholics as one, either oppressed or not oppressed? I mean, that is not an American way to view religious diversity.
Dr. Zeoli Jasser, founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, thank you so much for making the time in Philadelphia. We really appreciate it. Keep up the good work.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. Anytime.